Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad you're here today because what we're about to talk about might quietly change the way you navigate life's most difficult relationships. You know that feeling when someone hurts you, betrays you, maybe even seems to go out of their way to provoke you, and every part of you wants to retaliate, to win, to prove them wrong. But a part of you also knows that fighting back directly rarely leads to peace. It drains your energy, takes your focus away from the life you could be building, and pulls you into a toxic spiral that serves no one, especially not yourself. What if I told you there was another way, a way drawn from ancient wisdom, but more relevant than ever? A way where you could completely dismantle the power that your enemies hold over you without raising your voice, without a single argument, without sacrificing your dignity or stooping to their level. That is the power of Stoicism, and today we're going to explore exactly how you can apply 13 Stoic ways to destroy your enemy, not by fighting them, but by becoming so composed, so free, so indifferent to their attempts to pull you down that they lose all power over you. In this video, we'll be leaning on the timeless wisdom of Marcus Aurelius himself, but we're going to bring this into your modern life, your workplace conflicts, your relationship betrayals, your difficult family members, and even those silent resentments you may carry quietly. These methods aren't just abstract philosophy, they're practical emotional strategies designed to make you more grounded, self-possessed, and ultimately untouchable. So let's breathe, settle in, and start this journey together. When someone wounds us emotionally, it's tempting to think that reacting quickly or harshly gives us strength. But Marcus Aurelius knew better. Real strength is in discipline, in temperance, in choosing how you show up rather than reacting automatically. The first way to destroy your enemy without fighting them is to master your silence. Think about how rare silence has become in our lives today. We fill every moment with opinions, social media debates, passive-aggressive texts. And yet, nothing disarms an enemy like your refusal to engage. Imagine someone throwing words at you, gossiping behind your back, baiting you into an argument, and you meet them not with an angry defense, but with silence. Not coldness, but peace. Silence is a mirror that forces them to confront themselves. It makes them uncomfortable because it reveals their own desperation for attention and control. In relationships, this silence isn't about punishment, it's about creating space for dignity. When you refuse to meet pettiness with pettiness, you assert an unspoken truth that your energy is too valuable to waste. You're telling them, without telling them, that you live on a different plane now, one where their drama doesn't reach you. And over time, silence wears them down. They can't control someone who won't participate in their game. But silence isn't suppression. It isn't about holding in anger until it poisons you from the inside. Marcus Aurelius reminds us that we can acknowledge the emotion, but we don't have to act from it. We can observe our anger the way we observe clouds passing across the sky, fleeting, changing, not something to hold on to. That's your first power, your refusal to play their game, and once you've mastered silence, you begin to cultivate the second way, becoming indifferent to their opinion of you. This is where real freedom begins. In love, in family, at work, we often give others so much power over us because we crave their approval or fear their judgment. But Marcus Aurelius invites us to ask, why does it matter? Why let your peace be disturbed by the thoughts of someone who may not even know themselves well? Your enemy's opinion of you is their business, not yours. It exists in their mind, shaped by their wounds, their insecurities, their projections. Why borrow their burdens? In practice, this looks like walking into a room knowing that people will form opinions, some flattering, some critical, and realizing none of it touches your core. You remain centered because you know who you are. This isn't arrogance, it's a quiet confidence, a sense that your worth doesn't rise or fall depending on whether someone praises or blames you today. When you no longer seek to change their opinion, they lose all leverage over you. Their attempts to wound you fall flat, and that, ironically, can be more devastating for them than any direct confrontation. The third way, closely related, is to outgrow them. Yes, outgrow them emotionally, spiritually, even socially. When we're entangled in conflict, it's easy to feel like we're stuck in a loop, like we can't move forward until we've resolved it or until they apologize or change. But a truly stoic response is to focus on your own growth so completely that you move beyond their reach altogether. Imagine this like climbing a mountain. Your enemy is throwing stones from below, but you keep climbing, and soon they're too far away for those stones to touch you. In relationships, this might mean investing in your emotional self-mastery, learning to soothe yourself instead of seeking their validation, building a life filled with meaning so that the rejection loses its sting. In your career, it might mean leveling up your skills, your network, your opportunities so dramatically that their attempts to undermine you simply become irrelevant. What happens when you do this? Your enemy is left powerless, not because you attacked them, but because you outpaced them. And that's the most beautiful kind of victory, one where your success renders their hostility obsolete. As we begin to weave these stoic strategies into your life, what you're really doing is changing the way you relate to power. No longer is power about domination or revenge. It's about inner mastery, about becoming so steady, so self-aware, that you can walk into any storm and remain untouched. That's the kind of man or woman you are becoming, grounded, calm, graceful, and yet utterly unshakable. Now that we've begun this exploration together from silence to indifference, and then to growth, we're starting to build a life where your enemies, critics, and detractors simply can't hurt you anymore, and that journey is just beginning. So as we settle deeper into this conversation, let's pause for a moment and reflect. When you decide to walk this path of stoic mastery, you're not just protecting yourself from your enemy, you're liberating yourself from the exhausting cycle of reaction, judgment, and ego that most people are trapped in. And it feels good, doesn't it, to know you don't have to get entangled in petty wars just to prove you're strong. Now, let's move into another powerful stoic way to destroy your enemy without ever lifting a finger, living your best life genuinely, joyfully, and unapologetically. You see, when someone sets themselves up as your enemy, what they really want is your attention. They thrive on seeing that they can affect your mood, your decisions, your peace. But what if, instead of offering them that attention, you chose to invest it completely in yourself? What if your entire focus was on creating a life that feels so rich, so deeply aligned with who you are, that your enemy begins to realize they can't touch you anymore? This isn't about superficial success or showing off. It's about rising quietly. Imagine a life where your mornings begin not with dread, but with gratitude. Where your work is a craft, your relationships are authentic, your health and energy are strong, all because you chose not to let conflict define you. In fact, your enemy's hostility becomes fuel, a reminder that your greatest revenge is to live beautifully, mindfully, and freely. And you might notice this in practice. The more you focus inward, tending to your emotional well-being, cultivating meaningful connections, pursuing excellence in your work, the more irrelevant their antagonism becomes. At first, they may even escalate their attempts, frustrated that you aren't playing the old game. But soon they'll recognize the truth. They no longer have access to you. And that realization that they have lost their power often does more to destroy their agenda than any confrontation ever could. There's a tenderness in this as well. Sometimes the people who oppose us most bitterly are themselves deeply wounded. A Stoic doesn't pretend this isn't so, but they also don't let that wound dictate their life. In love and dating, we see this too. Maybe you've had a partner who seemed to lash out not because of who you are, but because of their own pain. And the greatest gift you can give yourself, and even them, is to not absorb that pain, to live as a mirror reflecting back only your own peace. This brings us naturally to another subtle but devastatingly effective way to destroy an enemy without a fight, practicing radical empathy, but not in the way most people think. Stoic empathy isn't about excusing poor behavior or allowing yourself to be mistreated. No, it's about seeing the full humanity of the other without surrendering your own power. When Marcus Aurelius reflected on the faults of others, he reminded himself that every insult, every act of cruelty, comes from ignorance, fear, or pain. So instead of reacting with anger, we can respond internally with a kind of quiet understanding. It might sound counterintuitive, but empathy actually disarms an enemy. It denies them the satisfaction of seeing you flustered or angry, and this empathy frees you too, because when you realize that their attacks come from their own unresolved suffering, you stop taking it personally. Their cruelty no longer pierces your armor because you recognize it for what it is, projection, and in this space of empathy, you begin to soften in a way that protects you even more. Your posture changes, you're no longer defensive, you're grounded, expansive, gracious, and that, paradoxically, makes it impossible for your enemy to harm you emotionally. Their insults fall into an ocean of your calm understanding and vanish. In a relationship, this might look like letting a partner's cutting remark pass without escalation, because you understand it's about their stress, their insecurity, not about your worth. In family conflict, it might mean setting clear boundaries, but doing so without resentment or bitterness, simply as an act of self-care. And at work, it might mean quietly excelling while refusing to gossip or engage in toxic competition. Empathy in its stoic form becomes a shield, and what your enemy doesn't realize is that while they may interpret your calm as weakness, it's actually your deepest strength. You're not tolerating mistreatment, you're transcending it. You're demonstrating a rare emotional intelligence, one that keeps your peace intact even as the storms rage around you. And then there's the next layer of power, cultivating patience. In a world that glorifies immediate responses, quick comebacks, and instant justice, patience has become a lost art. But Marcus Aurelius understood that time itself is an ally when we step back from the drama. Sometimes your enemy's greatest undoing is simply letting them run their course while you remain steady and patient. Time has a way of revealing motives, exposing lies, showing true character, and when you're patient, you allow your enemy to self-destruct while you conserve your energy for what truly matters. Imagine this in your life. Instead of rushing to clear your name when someone gossips, you wait. You continue to live with integrity, knowing that truth will surface in due course. Instead of confronting every small slight, you breathe, observe, and allow time to do its work. This kind of patience isn't passive, it's an active practice of choosing your battles wisely, conserving your emotional resources for what truly deserves your attention. So as we continue on this journey together, what you're cultivating is not a cold indifference, but a graceful, centered way of being in the world. You're learning how to remove your enemy's power not by attacking them, but by mastering yourself so fully that they can no longer reach you. And in that mastery, you're discovering freedom. There's something beautiful that happens when patience becomes your default. You begin to notice that most conflicts don't require a response at all. They resolve themselves in the silence and grace of your non-participation. But sometimes patience alone isn't enough because enemies, especially those close to us, can be persistent, can push and probe, looking for the weak point where we might finally crack. And that brings us to another extraordinary Stoic tool for dissolving an enemy's influence without ever fighting them, the discipline of detachment. Detachment doesn't mean that you stop feeling, that you go cold or become numb. No. Real Stoic detachment is about allowing feelings to arise without becoming enslaved by them. It's knowing that emotions, even difficult ones, anger, resentment, disappointment, are natural, but they don't have to own you. They can visit, but they don't get to take up residence. Think about it this way: when your enemy provokes you, they expect a reaction. That's their currency. That's how they measure their success. But when you remain internally free, when their words or actions no longer dictate your emotional landscape, you've quietly destroyed their influence. You can still care, you can still love, you can still empathize, but you're no longer tied to the outcome of their behavior. In relationships, this is especially powerful. Maybe you've experienced the push-pull dynamic where someone hurts you, apologizes, then hurts you again, that exhausting emotional yo-yo. Detachment doesn't mean you don't care about them. It means you finally understand that their actions reflect them, not you. You can set boundaries without hostility. You can withdraw your emotional investment without bitterness. And in doing so, you liberate yourself from their cycles. This emotional freedom is devastating for those who depend on your reactions to feel powerful. When you stop reacting, they are left alone with themselves, and often that is far more difficult than any fight you could have given them. It's a quiet, graceful power. You've taken back control of your own nervous system, and from this detachment grows yet another Stoic superpower, choosing presence over rumination. Marcus Aurelius wrote endlessly about returning to the present moment, about focusing your energy on what's in your control right now. Your enemy, whether they realize it or not, tries to pull you out of the present. They want you replaying their insults, stewing over the past, imagining future revenge. But when you refuse to travel in your mind, and instead return to your breath, your body, the task in front of you, you break their hold completely. Picture this in your daily life. You're walking through your home or sitting at your desk, and suddenly that old resentment rises up. That memory of what they said, what they did, how unfair it all was. But you notice it, breathe, and gently redirect your attention back to the moment you're in. The weight drops from your shoulders because you realize that right here, right now, you are safe. You are free. Their past cruelty exists only in your memory, not in this moment, and so you continue moving forward, step by step, rooted in the now. You attend to what you can control, your work, your health, your relationships with those who love you well. You invest your energy in what nourishes you, and as you do this, your enemy's power fades. Not because you won a battle, but because you stopped fighting a battle that never deserved your time in the first place. This isn't weakness, this is profound strength. It's what separates the wise from the reactive, the calm from the chaotic. And when you embody this presence, people notice, your enemy notices too. They realize they no longer know how to get to you, that their usual weapons fall harmlessly to the ground because you're simply not there to receive them anymore. And from this posture of detachment and presence, another Stoic way to destroy your enemy emerges naturally, practicing genuine gratitude. It might sound strange. Why would gratitude have anything to do with dealing with enemies? But think about what happens inside you when you start to appreciate the good that surrounds you. When you consciously shift your gaze toward what is working, what is beautiful, what is nourishing in your life, your enemy's attempts to darken your mood lose their impact entirely. Gratitude isn't just a pleasant emotion. It's a strategic weapon in the arsenal of the wise. When you wake up grateful for your health, for your home, for your mind, for your ability to feel joy, your enemy's criticisms seem trivial. Their attempts to undermine you no longer stick because you're too busy being genuinely thankful for everything that makes your life rich and full. This gratitude even transforms the way you see your enemy. You might find yourself silently thanking them, not for their cruelty or malice, but for the opportunity they gave you to grow, for the chance to develop patience, detachment, self-control, for showing you, perhaps harshly, where your boundaries needed to be. In this way, your enemy becomes your teacher, even if they never intended to help you. And what could be more devastating to their ego than knowing that their attempts to harm you have made you stronger, kinder, more centered, and more free? So in this quiet rebellion, detachment, presence, gratitude, you are crafting a life where conflict cannot take root. You are building an inner architecture that no enemy can breach. And as you do this, your relationships evolve too. You become less reactive, more thoughtful, more grounded. The people who truly love you will feel this energy shift. They'll sense that they're dealing with a person who is no longer easily disturbed, whose peace is no longer negotiable. This is the ultimate Stoic art, not escaping the world, but living in it fully, gracefully, and untouchably. And it's not just about the enemy outside, it's about quieting the enemy within too. Because when you cultivate this kind of inner peace, you discover that your most dangerous opponent was never them, it was your own reactivity, your own fear, your own unexamined wounds. And as you heal those, you become invincible. As you deepen into this practice, you start to realize that your enemy isn't just that difficult person at work, or the ex who betrayed you, or the family member who never misses a chance to criticize. Your enemy can show up in many forms, even as your own thoughts when you dwell in resentment, blame, or bitterness. And this awareness brings us to another devastatingly subtle Stoic principle, refusing to carry your enemy in your mind. We don't often think about it this way, but every time you replay their words, rehearse your arguments, or fantasize about what you wish you'd said, you're giving them space in your most precious real estate, your own mind, and Marcus Aurelius understood this clearly. He reminded himself, and now reminds us, that the only true power anyone has over you is the power you grant them through your attention. So when you choose to stop carrying your enemy mentally, you strip them of their last weapon. In a relationship context, this can feel liberating. You're not pretending the hurt never happened. You're simply choosing not to allow that hurt to shape your daily mood anymore. Maybe it's the ex who wronged you years ago. Maybe it's the coworker who competes with you in petty ways. But now every time you feel their presence rising in your mind uninvited, you simply observe it, smile, and gently let it go. You return to yourself, and that choice over and over becomes a quiet revolution inside you. It's here that another power begins to bloom, becoming unpredictable in your grace. Your enemy thrives on patterns. They expect that when they attack, you'll respond a certain way. But when you step outside their expectations, when you meet negativity with a surprising calm, when you refuse to argue where you once would have, you become unreadable to them. And unpredictability is unnerving to someone whose power depended on your predictability. This unpredictability doesn't mean inconsistency or chaos. No, it means your grace becomes sovereign. Sometimes you might simply nod and say nothing. Other times you might offer a kind word where they expected a cutting one. You're no longer dancing to their music. You're setting your own rhythm now, and this quiet shift changes the entire dynamic. You become impossible to manipulate. This is especially important in romantic relationships. Perhaps you've had moments when you felt you needed to defend yourself endlessly, explain yourself exhaustively, clarify your feelings repeatedly, only to find that it made no difference. But when you release yourself from that cycle and meet drama with a gracious, grounded unpredictability, you reclaim your dignity. You're no longer pulled into reactive loops. Instead, your presence itself becomes a calm disruption of their expectations. And from here grows one of the deepest Stoic lessons, embodying self-respect so fully that it speaks louder than any response ever could. Marcus Aurelius didn't teach arrogance or superiority. He taught that your character is your true power. When you cultivate self-respect, your enemy's attacks begin to reveal themselves as small, petty, almost childlike. They lose their sting because you recognize that you no longer have anything to prove. In practical terms, this might mean refusing to gossip about them, even when others invite you to join in. It might mean continuing to act with integrity even when no one is watching, because your actions are about your standard, not their behavior. You begin to live not for applause or approval or revenge, but because this is simply who you are now, grounded, dignified, clear. And here's the beautiful paradox. When you begin to live this way, many enemies simply drift away on their own. Their desire to provoke you withers when it no longer works. The conflict dissolves not because they changed, but because you did. You made yourself immune to their drama by raising your internal standards so high that their games became irrelevant. This kind of self-respect nourishes you from the inside out. It affects how you walk into a room, how you speak to yourself when no one else is listening, how you handle even the small irritations of daily life. And slowly it changes your environment too, because when you show up with this level of grace and clarity, the people who truly value you will rise to meet you there, while those who thrive on drama will naturally fall away. There's another quiet power you begin to discover here, the discipline of withdrawal. Not every battle needs your participation. In fact, some of the most powerful Stoic victories happen when you simply withdraw emotionally, mentally, sometimes even physically. Withdrawal isn't avoidance, it's choosing your peace over endless entanglement. It's stepping back not because you're afraid, but because you're wise enough to know that not every provocation deserves your energy. Imagine a moment when someone is provoking you, baiting you into reacting, and instead of engaging, you step back calmly, deliberately. You choose silence, you walk away, you redirect your focus to something meaningful. Your enemy is left in their own storm while you continue to build your calm. In today's world, this might mean choosing not to respond to a hurtful text or an email written in bad faith. It might mean declining an invitation to a conversation that would go nowhere. It might mean physically creating space, going for a walk, focusing on your work, pouring yourself into your passions instead of the quarrel. And every time you do this, you strengthen your inner architecture. You prove to yourself that your peace is no longer at the mercy of external chaos. You might be surprised at how quickly this begins to change the dynamic. The people who used to count on your reactions will notice your absence, your emotional absence first, then sometimes even your physical absence. And they will have to face themselves without your participation. This isn't abandonment of your values. It's actually the purest expression of them. You're saying without words, I will not fight battles that steal my peace. I will not surrender my energy to every provocation. I choose to guard my spirit, to nurture my well-being, to keep my attention sacred. And in doing so, you not only destroy the power of your enemies, you elevate your own life to a place where only grace, dignity, and peace can reach you. As we continue this path together, something becomes clear. Every Stoic practice we've talked about so far is not about defeating another person at all. It's about elevating yourself to a place where external conflict can't reach you anymore, and that's what makes these ways so effective. Your enemy may think you're retreating, when in fact you're rising. This brings us to a profound but rarely practiced art, cultivating self-sufficiency emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Marcus Aurelius didn't just talk about detachment from enemies. He spoke of becoming a person who finds everything they need within themselves. And this is one of the most powerful ways to dismantle the grip that enemies, critics, or toxic people have over you. When you stop depending on them for anything, even for closure, they lose all leverage. Think about this for a moment. So much of our suffering comes from expecting others to give us what they can't or won't: apology, validation, explanation, fairness. But when you become emotionally self-sufficient, you reclaim that power. You no longer need their apology to heal. You no longer need their validation to know your worth. You no longer need their acknowledgement to feel seen. In modern relationships, this is liberating. Perhaps you've waited for a partner to say sorry, to finally recognize your efforts, to treat you the way you deserve. And maybe that day never came, or if it did, it felt empty. When you embrace self-sufficiency as a Stoic, you stop waiting altogether. Your healing no longer depends on them. You give yourself the care, the validation, the closure you sought. And this emotional independence is felt deeply by your enemy. Where they once believed they could keep you stuck in a cycle of neediness or longing, they now encounter a different energy, wholeness. Your self-respect begins to shine so brightly that their ability to destabilize you vanishes completely. You walk away from the entire dynamic not bitterly, but quietly and with grace, and that departure is its own kind of quiet triumph. At the same time, this isn't about cutting yourself off from love or connection. No, it's about ensuring that when you give yourself to others, you do so from abundance, not from deficit. You connect freely because you're already whole, not because you're trying to fill a void. And that energy, it's magnetic. It draws healthy relationships to you while naturally repelling toxic ones. Flowing naturally from this place of self-sufficiency is another subtle Stoic skill, mastering your internal narratives. Often, our enemies don't harm us with their actions alone. They harm us through the stories we tell ourselves afterward. I'm not good enough. I should have done better. Why did they treat me this way? These stories become loops that we replay long after the conflict is over. Marcus Aurelius reminds us that the mind is powerful, but it must be trained. When you catch yourself spinning these narratives, you pause. You remind yourself that no one can injure your mind unless you let them. Their behavior reflects them. Your interpretation is what determines your peace. In practice, this looks like catching that inner critic when it tries to blame you for their betrayal, or that voice that whispers you're not enough because someone dismissed you, or that story that says their rejection means something about your worth. You gently interrupt those narratives. You replace them with truth. I am whole. I am enough. I am grounded. I am free. This is not toxic positivity. It's radical clarity, seeing things as they are, without adding unnecessary suffering through mental distortion. And as you develop this clarity, your enemy's influence dissolves even further, because what they said or did no longer has the power to define the story you tell about yourself. Imagine how this changes your daily life. Instead of ruminating on old wounds, you begin to cherish the present moment. Instead of questioning your worth because of someone else's actions, you root into your values, your integrity, your character. You stop seeking permission to feel at peace, you simply claim it, and from this self-mastery arises another natural way to destroy your enemy's grip, unwavering consistency. When you begin living from this grounded, clear place, your words and actions align seamlessly. You're no longer swayed by their provocations one day and then reactive the next. You become steady, and that steadiness is unshakable. Your enemy may still try to provoke you, but over time even they will see you no longer oscillate between calm and chaos. You're consistent now. Your values are lived out in your choices every day, without exception, and that consistency makes you immune to manipulation. This steadiness builds trust with yourself too. You can look in the mirror and say with honesty, I am who I say I am. I live with integrity, not because of how others treat me, but because this is simply how I've chosen to live. And through all of this, your self-sufficiency, your mastery over your internal narratives, your unwavering consistency, you embody a kind of quiet, dignified power that no enemy can penetrate. They might still talk about you, they might still resent you, but you are simply free, free from the drama, free from the mental burden, free to build your life exactly as you want it. And the beauty of all this, you didn't have to fight them, you didn't have to prove them wrong, you didn't have to win an argument. You simply became untouchable. And so here we are walking the final stretch of this quiet path together, a path that's less about your enemy and more about who you are becoming. There's one final principle we must explore if we are to truly master this art of destroying your enemy without ever lifting a finger, the art of living with purpose. When you choose purpose over pettiness, you begin to see that most conflicts, resentments, and provocations aren't worthy of your time because they distract you from the deeper work of your life. Marcus Aurelius lived each day asking himself, "What is my work? What is my purpose here?" He understood that to waste energy on grievances was to waste precious time that could have been spent creating something meaningful. Purpose is the compass that keeps you steady when others try to pull you into their storms. When you're anchored in a mission, whether it's raising your children well, building a business with integrity, nurturing a craft, or simply living with kindness, your enemy's noise fades into irrelevance. You stop needing revenge because you have something far more beautiful to devote yourself to. And this is where you find your deepest freedom, because your enemy can't distract a person on a mission. They can throw insults, gossip, sabotage, but when your gaze is fixed on something higher, you remain untouched. Their drama becomes background noise. Their provocations fall flat. In modern relationships, this is where your most powerful transformation happens. Instead of trying to fix the person who hurt you or waiting for them to recognize your worth, you devote yourself to living fully. You cultivate love where it's welcomed, peace where it's possible, and alignment where it matters. You begin to embody this quiet strength that says, "I don't have time for games anymore. I'm busy becoming who I'm meant to be." This isn't coldness. It's clarity. It's that subtle but profound shift from living in reaction to living in creation. You're no longer defined by what others have done to you. You're defined by what you're building, the life you're creating, the love you're nurturing. And as this purpose takes root, you begin to feel something unexpected, compassion even for your enemy. Not the kind of compassion that invites them back into your life or lowers your standards, but a compassion born from understanding that their hostility came from their own suffering, their own blindness, their own confusion. You don't have to excuse it, but you also don't have to carry it. You begin to walk lighter. Your mind feels clearer, your heart feels freer. You stop obsessing about whether they'll ever get it, or whether they'll ever see your side, or whether they'll ever change. Because you have changed. And in this change, you embody what Stoicism has always promised: resilience without hardness, strength without cruelty, dignity without arrogance, freedom without isolation. You're now the kind of person who doesn't have to fight enemies, because you've become so deeply at peace that their very concept feels foreign to you. Their anger is theirs to keep. Their bitterness is theirs to carry. You have outgrown the entire dynamic. This quiet power radiates into every area of your life. Your relationships become richer because you're no longer weighed down by grudges. Your work becomes more fulfilling because you're no longer distracted by gossip or competition. Even your body feels lighter because you're no longer holding tension that doesn't belong to you. This is what Marcus Aurelius meant when he said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." You've stopped arguing. You've stopped justifying. You've stopped waiting for them to change. You simply are. And now, as we come to the close of this journey together, remember this: you don't need permission to be at peace. You don't need an apology to heal. You don't need justice to feel whole. You don't even need closure, because you are your own closure. You're the one who closes the door on the past, who locks it gently, who walks away with grace. Your enemy will feel this shift, even if they never say a word. They'll know, they'll sense it. You're no longer participating in their game. You've destroyed their power not through aggression or argument, but through mastery of yourself. So wherever you are today, whatever conflict you've carried, whatever betrayal you've endured, whatever insult you've absorbed, breathe. You are already free. You just have to live like it. And as you go forward, live purposefully, live with grace, live untouchably. That is the ultimate Stoic way to destroy your enemy without fighting them, to become so whole, so grounded, and so at peace that they lose the power to hurt you forever.